All right. So today, one of our presenters is Lisa Blecker.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm the Pesticide Safety Education Program Coordinator for the UC statewide IPM program.
Great. And Carrie is another co-presenter today. Carrie, do you want to introduce yourself real fast?
Sure, thank you. I'm Carrie Winbill Rojas. I am the Associate Director for the Urban and Community IPM group within the statewide IPM program and an Area Integrated Pest Management Advisor in Sacramento, Yolo, and Solano counties.
Great, thank you. And then I am Sarah Hernick, and I work with Lisa in the Pesticide Safety Education Program, and I'm just going to be offering technical support today. I'll be doing tech support today, and then our host and probably the person you've been in contact with the most with this webinar is Maria Alfaro. She's having some technical issues, so you probably won't see or hear from her today, but she's a part of our team, and yeah, she's great. And then, you know, after the webinar, if you have questions or want to continue a conversation or whatever, you can contact us at pesticidesafety@ucanr.edu or ucanr.edu/trainme for more training inquiries if you have any specific requests. And we do have a Twitter handle. You can tweet at us at pesticidesafetyuc. So, all right, I'll let Carrie and Lisa take it away now. Thanks for listening to my spiel.
So thank you, Sarah. Today we will be talking about disinfectants and the proper selection and use in sort of a variety of areas, and in particular, some of the things to be cognizant of when you are using disinfectants and why. So first off, we want to give kind of an overview of what we will be addressing today. So we just want to make sure that if you are going to be using disinfectants either for your job, for you know, incidental use, for everyday use, or in the house, that you select the proper pesticide for the job that you're going to be doing. And you want to make sure that you're using the disinfectant correctly. This will ensure the effectiveness of the product against what you are trying to disinfect and the surface, and correctly using the product according to the label and other things that we will address today will help you use it safely to protect yourself and your family and others. And so we will also talk about towards the end licensing that is needed for offering disinfection and sanitation services for a few different license types in California. The important thing to start with in understanding the terms that we'll be discussing today, and you know, there's been a lot of talk about cleaning and sanitizing and disinfecting and sterilizing. There's a lot of terms out there, and they do mean different things. So we want to make sure that everyone is understanding what we are discussing today and the differences. So the term cleaning is really to wipe up soil and grime and dirt and remove these products and remove some germs from a surface, usually using soap and water and a little bit of elbow grease. And so cleaning is not the same thing as sanitizing and disinfecting. It's wiping up an area. And it's important to clean a surface before disinfecting. And sometimes people don't always realize that. Sanitizing reduces the germs, usually bacteria, on a surface to levels that might be considered safe for public health. And so it's more than cleaning, but it's not quite disinfecting. What disinfecting is destroying, and we might say killing some bacteria, but viruses are actually inactivated. So destroying some of the bacteria, viruses, fungi, molds that may be on a surface. And so the important thing is to understand the distinction between these terms in order to get the kind of germ removal you're looking for. So this is a nice graphic that we borrowed from a company in the US that just kind of details some of the differences between products that you may be seeing on the shelves or purchasing or have in your home. So just to sort of reiterate what I just said, a cleaner is going to be something that removes the dirt. Sanitizers are going to remove some of the bacteria and to levels that might be safe, but sanitizers might not get everything. Disinfectants are even more powerful than sanitizers in that they will target and kill or deactivate viruses and certain bacteria and fungi. And so we're going to talk about those three today. We're not going to talk about the next two, but a virucide is something that is a pesticide that targets viruses. And so these products are specifically targeted towards inactivating viruses. And then a sterulant, as you can see there, will eliminate all kinds of things. And so we're focusing mostly on the disinfectants today. But it's important to note, and Lisa's going to talk about this too, that any product that claims to kill bacteria, viruses, fungi, and molds must be registered with the United States Environmental Protection Agency as a pesticide. Next slide. And we'll be talking about some specific products and labels today, but just to, before we move on to Lisa's portion, sanitizing and cleaning wipes are not the same as disinfecting wipes. So as we already discussed, cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting. So if you have some wipes around the house, it's important to know what they are and what they're for. And so cleaning wipes may just be for removing grime and dirt, and as this label shows, cuts, grease, and grime. These labels are going to say things like cleans and whitens and removes grease, but they're not going to say disinfects or kills germs. So they do not kill germs. These kinds of wipes are, these cleaning wipes are not registered by the EPA, and they are not considered pesticides. They also cannot make claims that they do disinfect. And again, we'll see a lot of labels today. Lisa?
So as Carrie mentioned, disinfectants are pesticides. So if you guys are used to more traditional pesticides, I like to think of disinfectants as pesticides that are targeting germs, bacteria, virus. That's the pest that they're after, okay? And as with all pesticides, if you're using them in a workplace as part of your job, they must be registered by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, or US EPA. So you should be able to find an EPA registration number on all of these products that are disinfecting. Okay, so again, cleaning and sanitizing wipes, they're not going to make claims to disinfect, and they also will not have an EPA registration number. So if you can imagine, pesticide, just like with any pesticide that you would use out in your lawn, out in the field, where any other use site, you have to follow the label directions. It has to be registered for the correct spot. There are specific detailed directions on mixing and loading on the label. And so those all have to be followed. These are pesticides just like any other pesticide. So disinfectants, as I mentioned, they're pesticides. So with any other pesticide that we use in California, they must also be registered in California. So we're going to give you some tips on how to find the right disinfectant for the job and how to verify that it's actually registered in California, because that's not going to be very evident from the label. It's evident that it's registered by EPA because it'll have an EPA registration number, but it won't be evident. Typically, it's not evident that it's also registered in California. So it has to go through two registration processes, just like any other pesticide. And so you need to follow all label instructions and applicable state laws and regulations when you're using these products. So the label is the law, and it is a violation, just as with any pesticide, of federal law to use a pesticide product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. And all these disinfectant products, whether they're wipes, whether it's bleach, whatever the actual product is, they will all say these on their label. So I have a little graphic here that I like to use for a lot of reasons. One, because I like cake and I'm an optimistic person, so I like to think of laws and regulations in terms of cake, because who doesn't like cake? I mean, the cake is blue, but I mean, let's ignore that. So blue frosting's weird. I think I'm going to change that. So the base layer of cake is the federal law, okay? And so everybody in the United States has to follow this federal law. And the federal law that governs pesticide use in the United States is FIFRA, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. It also covers herbicides and viricides and any other side, but they named it in a weird way. I don't know why. And so that law is regulated, that is enacted in the United States by the US EPA, which is why they register pesticides. But you guys, we're so lucky. We live in the state of California. We have like a whole additional layer of cake right on top of the federal layer, which means that, you know, states have this opportunity to make laws and regulations that are more strict than what the federal law is. And that's exactly what we do here in California. And so we're also bound to Title III of the California Code of Regulations, which is governed by the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. So they register pesticides in California if they have already been registered by EPA and if they want to. There's lots of criteria. And then also at the county level, you're going to hear us say this a lot today. Talk to your county ag commissioners, because they are really in charge of enforcing federal, state, and county laws and regulations. So they have this burden on them to make sure you're following all the rules, like above and beyond. I mean, above them and, you know, within their power as well. And definitely they're your local enforcement arm. They're also your local compliance assistance arm. So they certainly know how to help you comply with laws and regulations with disinfectants or any other pesticide. So yay, we love cake. So we're going to launch poll number 3. You guys didn't miss a poll, don't worry. They're out of order because that's the way we live our lives. Can't help ourselves. So does a disinfectant label have to state that it's effective against COVID-19, also known as SARS-CoV-2, to be used against that particular virus? So it looks like most people have voted, but people are still voting. You guys are so great. Okay, we're a little split. So most people say no, and the rest of you either say yes or you don't know. So here's the thing. Okay, we can stop sharing. That poll just wants to be right in the middle of my window, and I don't know what to do about it. So there are actually no EPA registered disinfectants that are actually registered for control of COVID-19, but that's okay. Don't worry, okay? First of all, it takes a very long time to update pesticide registration. So this is a novel virus. It's just not on there yet. They just don't have all of the data. But EPA, so if you think about this in terms of a more traditional pesticide, right? So the pest is COVID-19. And even in an ag setting or even in a turf and landscape setting, the specific pest is not always on the label, and that's actually okay in California. But of course you want to choose a disinfectant product based on the fact that you think it's going to kill this pest. And so EPA is helping us out with that. They have this List N, and List N is all about COVID-19 or COVID-2. Anyway, so SARS-CoV-2. So it's all about, so they've collected, it's a list of disinfectant products that they believe are effective against COVID-19 just based on the other viruses that they are proven effective against, okay? They're registered by US EPA and they're believed to be effective. And so that is a really good source of information for what is an appropriate product if you're disinfecting against COVID-19. And so this is what it looks like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here right now because we'll go through and give you some clues to searching this list. It's not just, it's like a PDF list, but they've also launched this tool. It's kind of like a database. It's a query tool. And it's really helpful in narrowing down the list of products because there are hundreds of products here. And so we're going to talk about a few things dealing with disinfectants first, and then we'll come back and show you how to use this list to your advantage. So only use disinfectants on this list if you're providing disinfectant services for COVID-19. But again, this is an EPA list, and not all pesticides on this list are going to be registered in California, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how to verify that as well. So just to give you an idea, I don't remember how many different active ingredients are on there, but some of the common active ingredients are hydrogen peroxide, quaternary ammonia, bleach, citric acid, lactic acid, thiamol. These are some of the isopropyl alcohol. These are some of the active ingredients that are believed to be known or believed to be effective against COVID-19. So the label is the law, as I mentioned, and I never want you to forget that so long as you work around pesticides, or even if you're just using them in your home. So you need to follow all label instructions for mixing, using, disposal, the required PPE, contact time, and use sites. So I'm going to now pass it over to Carrie.
Thank you. So as Lisa said, you always want to make sure that you're following the label. And so here is a picture of a label with some things pointed out for you that you want to make sure to always follow the, we're going to talk about labels a lot. The font size on labels is very small. And so get out your magnifying lens or your glasses, but it's really important to make sure that you are following it. For one, you do want to make sure that the product is going to be effective. And you also want to make sure that you are not just wasting your time and money by having something not work, but you also need to keep yourself safe. So in the aspect of use sites, on the label, it will tell you, such as this label, you know, things about contact time, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but what's in the purple box, it says use only on hard, non-porous surfaces and other things. And so you want to make sure that the product is going to be right for the area that you are going to sanitize or disinfect. Each product has only been tested and shown to work where the label says that it can use. So you do want to make sure to follow the label because that's what it was tested for. That's what it's right for, and adhere to it. Next slide, please. The label is going to have instructions again for how to use it to make sure that it's going to be effective. So again, where you're going to find use sites and active ingredients and all of the instructions, you're going to find specifics. So many of these disinfectants will say, you know, clean up first, wipe down first, do this first. And then it may also state you know, protective gear, and again, the surfaces and other specifics. So you want to make sure to follow those. And as you can see from this one, it has different instructions for different areas. And so the use sites are always important. Next slide. To use the products effectively and what is a porous or a non-porous surface. So here's a list of some surfaces and what this term means. And you can find more information on the link that is listed there. And I do believe all of the links in the presentation will be sent to you today for more information and for reference. But porous surfaces are things that are not usually hard, that are going to allow for movement of liquids or other things through them. So things like bedding, right? Your bedding does breathe, or at least you hope so. And so that's a porous surface. And these are just some examples of common household items. And so all of the fabrics and the carpets and the pillows and the upholstery, these are all porous. Things that are semi-porous, so some things could move through and others would not, include concrete, that it could, absorb some of the material that is being applied to it, drywall, some of the construction materials, and even the grout in between your tiles and wood. And so depending on your product, you need to make sure that it is going to be appropriate for where you are going to be applying it. And then some of the non-porous include, glass and metal and some tiles. So just make sure that you are paying attention to this. All right, we have another poll for you to take. Make sure that you're awake about halfway through our presentation. What do you call the amount of time a disinfectant must remain on a remain wet on a surface? Again, you don't have to know this because we're going to talk about it in just a moment. We just want to see. Got about 86%, a couple more. The last one we had 94 people responding, so we know you can do it. We know you're out there. So the answer to that is contact time, and 86% of you got that right. So good job there. And so we're going to move on to what is contact time. So in order to use a disinfectant product correctly and safely, you want to make sure to pay attention to what is called the contact time or the dwell time. And while that does make sense, it's something that I had really never thought of before, talking all this time about viruses and disinfectants the way we have been lately. The amount of time that a disinfectant product must remain on a surface is called contact time, and it must remain visibly wet in order to actually kill the bacteria or inactivate the virus. And so that contact time is going to vary by product and by surface. And so you want to make sure to pay attention to that. The labels will state leave on the surface for 3 minutes, or sometimes they say to disinfect it's this long, to sanitize it's this long. And so you really do need to pay attention to that. And it will vary also by the pathogen, but it can be up to 10 minutes. And if you're like me, you clean something and then you want it to not be wet anymore, so you might wipe it off. And some do say rinse afterwards. So you just really need to pay attention to what is listed on the label. Next, please. So here is an example of a label, and just like I said, so to sanitize, it needs to remain wet for 30 seconds, right? And if you remember, sanitize is just removing or killing some of the bacteria or germs, but disinfecting is going to actually get rid of and kill or deactivate more. So this particular product shown, the label says for it to remain wet for 10 minutes, and then there's more there, probably allow surface to dry before doing something else. And then also to point out that you should wash your hands after using any pesticide, including these disinfectant pesticides. And another important aspect, and this could be on the next slide, yes, that if you don't adhere to the contact time that is required by the label, and we say required, not suggested or recommended, it's what's required for it to be effective. That if the surface that you are trying to disinfect dries too fast, or if you rinse it off or whatever other practices, the pathogens may remain active, may remain viable, may not be killed. And so using the disinfectant didn't really do anything. What also happens is if you don't use pesticides, including disinfectants, according to the label requirements, it might actually lead towards antimicrobial resistance or resistance to that pesticide being effective. And this is something that is a big problem with all kinds of pests, including bacteria and other pathogens, that the more they're exposed to an active ingredient, to these chemicals, they could sort of build up tolerance, and then things don't work on them anymore. And so we certainly don't want to encourage that. I always liken it to taking your antibiotics. The doctor tells you take 10 days worth, and after 5 days you feel fine, so maybe you stop taking it. That leads towards resistance of that um, antibiotic, or excuse me, of that bacteria or whatever is ailing you to that antibiotic, and then they don't work anymore. Next slide, please. And this was mentioned already. Next slide, Lisa. Oh, wait, sorry, we're on there. This was mentioned already, the use sites. So making sure that you have the right use site as in the surface, but there's also the place that you're going to be disinfecting. So is this at your home, or are you hired to disinfect an office building? Is that part of your job? Do you work at school sites and there are regulations that you have to adhere to for using disinfectants at school sites, hospitals, and the protocols there? So you want to make sure that you are using the right product for the location that you will be, and adhering to any of the regulations for that site. And Lisa has the next slide.
I don't know if we want to address some questions before Lisa starts,
Sure.
or if we want to save them for after we're done with presentation. But in the Q&A, we have a couple good questions.
Do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So somebody asked, any tips on how to keep a surface wet for 10 minutes? Trying to envision how to apply Lysol, for example, and keep it wet that long. Is the product designed to dry slowly to meet the contact time goal?
Right. So on the label, you know, the surface, it'll say things like for non-porous surfaces, do this, for porous surfaces, or it'll say, you know, not recommended for porous surfaces, because if it does have to remain for 10 minutes, then using something like aerosol Lysol, it may volatilize quicker than you intend. So perhaps that's not the best product for the surface and for what you're trying to disinfect. So it's not that you want to spray it and then hope that it doesn't dry within 10 minutes. And if it does, spray it again. You know, this is meant for, you know, the coverage and the use that the label states. I hope that was good enough.
Yeah, but I would also say, you know, they are designed to stay wet. Like if you follow the label instructions and you use them in the right spot, they are intended to keep themselves wet for that amount of time. So it's just a matter of not drying them. But if you can't keep them wet for the whole contact time, then it's possible that you're not applying it correctly, or that you're applying it to the wrong spot, like a porous surface or something.
Right.
And then we have another question. Can tolerance be built to any disinfectant or just to certain types?
So with resistance to a pesticide, it's resistance to the active ingredient within the pesticide. And we haven't talked too much about the active ingredient types, although Lisa did mention a few slides ago, but it's the resistance to the active ingredient, which is the material in a pesticide product that effectively kills the pest. So, or repels or other terms, but let's stick with kill. So they can build up resistance to any active ingredient. Some products have been used, some active ingredients have been used for many years without any kind of resistance, but there are many, many cases, especially in agriculture and with, you know, bacteria, where pests and bacteria and other pathogens have built up resistance to that active ingredient, and something else has to be found.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think resistance is a potential problem for all pesticides, but
all pesticides.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's not that it's Lysol or it's Clorox, it's the active ingredient within the different products.
Okay, so I told you that I was going to show you how to go through query list N. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of steps. So there's all these different criteria you can use to search for a product. If you already know the EPA registration number, then you can search by that. In this case, I don't know the EPA registration number. I have a particular active ingredient I'm looking for because I know it's on the safer list. You can search by use site, contact time, any combination of these criteria. So this is what I did. I went to hydrogen peroxide as my active ingredient. And then after that, I went to my use site being institutional. So there are certain disinfectants that are registered very specifically for healthcare purposes and not for like residential use. So and that's all going to be on your label. And so I chose institutional. I'm like at a daycare facility trying to disinfect with hydrogen peroxide. Okay. So I could go into contact time, but at this point, contact time doesn't matter to me in this particular situation. So I click on show my results and I get 72 results with this active ingredient. But I think that you can see here that I didn't search by only one active ingredient. I mean, I only searched for one active ingredient is the only thing that I queried for, but it also brought up products that have hydrogen peroxide, my target active ingredient, mixed with other active ingredients. So, I then have to pour through these 72 entries to find what I want. But you can see here, this is what the report looks like. You'll get the EPA registration number, the active ingredients, the product name, the company, and then follow the directions for this virus. Okay, so it tells you which instructions to follow because it identifies the virus most closely related to COVID-19 that this product is proven effective against. Okay, it gives you contact time, formulation, all of these things. And so I went and I chose this particular hydrogen peroxide product. So these are not labels. This is a list of products with information about them. This isn't a label generator. You have to also find the label. So I know that these are registered by EPA and they are effective against COVID-19. The next thing that I need to figure out is if it's registered in California or not. And so this EPA registration number is going to help me. All pesticide products registered in California have a California registration number, but it's based on the EPA registration number, and that's usually the best way to find it, though it is not a perfect system. So I then went to the DPR label database, and it's called a label database, but there's no labels in it. Okay, so it just like extracts information from the label so you can find a product and verify that it's registered, but you're not going to find an actual label. So I went here and I clicked on registration number and typed in the registration number that I found in the list end. And look, it shows that this product BCAP 35 antimicrobial agent. This is registered in California. And then if I could click further, like I can get more detailed information about this product, like use sites and things like that. And you can do this for any pesticide product in California. It's a California label database. It's not specific to disinfectants. List N is specific to disinfectants, but this DPR label database is not. Okay, it's any pesticide product registered in California. So anyway, so after I figured out that it's effective against COVID-19 and registered also in California, then I basically did a Google search for the label. And I did find it on the EPA website, but the EPA website doesn't have end use labels. It's called a master label. I don't know how to describe it in a very succinct way, but it's not a commercial, it's not a label that you'd find on a product in the store. So the label that comes on the container is really the best tool that you have. And so I'm also taking a different tactic. So I have these Clorox wipes in my home, and I wanted to figure out if they're effective against COVID-19. So I know that they're effective when I'm disinfecting my house. So I found the EPA registration number, which was like a 4-point font. I'm not even kidding. It was very difficult to find. It was written in red letters. I don't understand why, but I was able to find their EPA registration number. I put it into this list N, and so I found it. So active ingredient, quaternary ammonia. So a Clorox wipe, the active ingredient is not always bleach. So this goes to what Carrie was saying. It's not just that Lysol or Clorox is, pests are developing resistance to Lysol or Clorox. Lysol could be any number of active ingredients. Lysol is just the brand name, same as Clorox. So it's not bleach in this particular case. So then I also verified that this is registered in California because I like to do what is right. And so I found I have the label on my container. On my label, it tells me this is a disinfecting wipe, and it also tells me the active ingredients, okay? It tells me to use on hard, non-porous surfaces and non-food contact surfaces, okay? So if something says non-food contact surfaces, don't use it on food contact surfaces. It's not safe, okay? Because the residue there will stay and then somebody will eat the residue. So I see there's a question in the chat. I think it's a good time to answer it. And is Agrian a good source to find sanitizer labels? No. I use Google. That's a great question. It was very difficult to find the labels other than just finding the labels on the actual products. Google, the product name and then label. It's much easier to find a safety data sheet for these types of products than it is to find an actual consumer use label. Agrian really is great for things like ag use products, even rights of way products and landscape maintenance. So those more, I would say, traditional uses of pesticides, Agrian is really a really excellent source for that. But some of the products that you would use traditionally in your home or in a residence or a hospital, I haven't been very successful in finding sanitizer disinfectant labels on Agrian. Really, I just Google them and then dig and dig and dig. But you can go to the manufacturer's website as well. Like I could go to Clorox and dig, and I could also just reach out to them and ask them, and they would probably be able to provide it for me. One thing you can do is DPR does keep a scanned copy of the approved label. So they do have their labels. It's a scanned copy. It's not a very easy to read copy. But again, if you have a product, the original label is always the best thing to use. So going back to this, it's a violation of federal law to use this in a manner that's not consistent with the label. Treated surface to remain visibly wet for 10 seconds. So this one was, that's a pretty easy contact time. It's a wipe though. It gives me an EPA registration number. And what do you think it said about PPE requirements? I mean, if I'm using it in my home, that's one thing, but if I'm being hired to use these wipes in any setting whatsoever, I need to wear my personal protective equipment, okay? So this EPA label doesn't have any PPE requirements on it, but in California, we have an extra layer of cake, which includes very specific PPE requirements. So I've got a couple of examples of different disinfecting products, some more concentrated, obviously, which you can tell from the PPE statement. So it says coveralls over long sleeve shirt and long pants, socks and chemical resistant shoes, goggles or face shield, and chemical resistant gloves. So you really need to follow the label. But again, in California, the label is the law, but it's only halfway there, okay? So you need to know if your label doesn't have a PPE statement, you need to be wearing long sleeve shirt, long pants, socks, closed-toed shoes, chemical resistant gloves, and some eye protection. And then if your label does have PPE statements and they're more specific than that, then you follow those. So this is another product, and it says chemical resistant gloves and safety glasses or face shield. Even though it's a caution product, which is a lower level of acute human toxicity, but nonetheless, to keep yourself safe while using these pesticide products, you do have to follow the PPE statements the same way you would with any other kind of pesticide. So we need to use the products correctly to ensure effectiveness. Disinfectants are registered pesticides. So if there's just like one thing that you take away from this webinar, I hope that it's that. I mean, I hope you take away multiple things from this webinar, but certainly that is something that we've said a few times. So all state and federal regulations regarding using pesticides as an employee or pesticides in a workplace must be followed. Also, never mix cleaning products. So if you got, you know, a jug of something and a jug of something else, they do not get mixed. And I can assure you that the labels will also tell you, do not mix this, because it's just, your your workplace is not a chemistry lab. A little bit of something is good, then a lot of something is great. That's not the basic principle here, and mixing is not appropriate for these types of pesticides. So leave products in their original container with the label, because that's the best label. Even though you need a magnifying glass or a microscope, it is the best piece of information for all of the instructions. It's the best source of information for that. Always follow the directions for use on the label. Wash your hands after using. These are pesticides you would never use, you know, an ag use pesticide without washing your hands after using, and don't do that with these pesticides either. And you must also properly report disinfectant use, just like you would any other pesticide. It's a monthly summary report rather than the regular pesticide use report. But if you're using these as part of your job, as a service you're providing to clients, then pesticide use does get reported in those venues. And so I'm going to pass this back over to Carrie.
Great, thank you. We want to talk about some of the disinfectants that may be used, and some of the exposure that that is something to think about. So with many of the disinfectants, they can actually flare up or lead to workplace related asthma, and so they are termed asthmagens. And so some of the active ingredients or the materials within the pesticides that could trigger asthma include bleach, and I'm not going to try to say the next one, but you know, some of these that you see on the screen are disinfectants that are a bit more of an issue for folks when you are using them in the workplace. And so just to be careful when choosing the products. There are many different active ingredients out there. And so if asthma is a concern to either the user or to people around the area, there are non-asthma triggering or non-asthmagens that can be chosen instead of some of the more familiar active ingredients. And there's a whole list of them here. One thing to just consider is when you're looking at a label, you're looking at all the things we've been talking about today, and you're also going to consider what might be the best product to use for the person applying and for anyone that's in the area that may be affected. So you can see some of these. We will have a resource for you to a link to another resource that you can find more information about some of these safer products. But in a visual sort of sense, there are different environmental seals that you will find on a label. Next slide, Lisa. That may be healthier options than some of these asthma triggering or inflaring active ingredients. And so many of the labels will have these sort of seals or logos that they have to, of course, pass through the various folks that are certifying them. But you can look for things that have safer choice, which I believe used to be what's shown there is US EPA Design for the Environment. And so these logos would be on the label. There's also Green Seal certified and Eco Logo, which say that the product has reduced environmental impact, which could be a number of things, but they are greener or safer products that may still be effective against the bacteria, pathogen, virus you are trying to kill. Again, there are a lot of things to consider: the surface, the use site, the contact time, the mixing, and all of the things. So there's not just, oh, this is a great product, let me go buy that. You want to make sure that it's going to be effective against what you are trying to disinfect. But these products will have reduced negative effects on human health and the environment. Another poll, and it's not poll number 2, it's poll number 4. So we're going to talk about some licenses next. So let's see what you know. In California, which licenses must a company have to offer disinfection services? Which license must a company have to offer disinfection services?
So I'm going to answer a question in the Q&A while we're waiting for the poll results.
Okay.
So Alicia says, do employees who only handle disinfectants need to be trained on pesticide safety training per section 6724? That's a great question. And the answer is yes. So if they don't have a license or certificate in any other category or in the appropriate categories, then yes, they're pesticide handlers, they're unlicensed. And so in order to apply disinfectants as part of their job, they do need to have this annual training according to 6724. Some of the training topics are very specific to ag use pesticides, and the non-ag use pesticides don't have to follow don't have to include those training topics. So it's not as complete as if it were an ag pesticide handler in an ag setting, but yes, absolutely. And you would use a pesticide safety information series, the N series, which is for N non-ag, and it would be the N8 instead of the A8. And then I'll pass it back to Karen.
Great. Glad you answered that question. Okay, so the majority of respondents got it correct. A company, in order to offer disinfection services, must have a pest control business license and a QAL. And so we're going to talk about that next. All right, so to offer disinfection services, you must be licensed. And that entails having a valid pest control business license, as well as a qualified applicator license in California, and also holding the categories that are listed there. So A is residential, institutional, industrial. So you would have to have a QAC, but somebody who works within the pest control branch needs to have a QAL. So category A. Category K is it's health related, and then category P is microbial services. So I think many people who are logged in today may be sort of in the category A. And so category A is fairly broad, you know, warehouses and storage facilities and schools and hospitals and other things. So you need to, in order to offer disinfection services, you have to be properly licensed. And currently, because of the COVID-19 situation, the California Department of Pesticide Regulation is not currently offering new tests for anyone to become licensed. And until such time, you know, it's just kind of on hold right now. Next. And so for pest control businesses and applicators, you know, you need to make sure that your license allows for disinfectant use in the environment or the location where you have been requested to come and offer those services. If you have any questions, and Lisa mentioned this at the beginning, any questions, contact your county agricultural commissioner for pest control businesses to provide these services, especially during the time of COVID-19. They may allow other license types, other categories to provide these services. The Department of Pesticide Regulation put out that any pest control business with any QAL could offer disinfection services because, again, they've been trained, whereas those other three categories generally were the only ones. So if any QAL, the um, the 90-day sort of allowance for that exception expired on July 6th of 2020. Whether it has been extended that pest control businesses with any category QAL can still apply or offer disinfection services, we are unsure at this time. That is a DPR decision. So contact your county ag commissioner, and they're the ones that are going to let you know and be able to find out for you. And so in general, the Structural Pest Control Board, and who licenses structural pest management professionals, they do not allow for the application of antimicrobials or disinfectants because bacteria, and especially viruses, are not considered a structural pest. You know, they treat for cockroaches and bed bugs and ants and spiders and rodents, and many of them do weeds as well, but viruses and bacteria are not considered structural. And so anyone with a structural license, which is administered by the California Structural Pest Board, would not be allowed to apply or use offer disinfectant services unless they also have someone with a QAL in that branch. And so that's important to know. The virus is not vectored by an insect, so it's very different things. But again, anyone who may be on this call that is a licensed structural pest management professional, check with your local ag commissioner about your license type and just make sure that you are properly licensed to offer these services.
Okay, so our take-home messages are: contact your county agricultural commissioner for guidance on performing these services with the license type that you have, as Carrie just mentioned. Use the correct pesticide for the job and use the product correctly to ensure effectiveness, but also safety. Disinfectants are pesticides and the label is the law. So follow all of those instructions on the label, but also remember to layer in the California regulations that go above and beyond the label regulations oftentimes. So we have gathered some resources for you, and we will send you, when we send you your verification of attendance within a week from now, we have like a whole list of links that we'll be sending you. So any link that we provided during the webinar or referred to will also be sent to you in your email. So if you go to the IPM website, we have these self-paced online courses. Some of them are on IPM in schools, some of them are on personal protective equipment. We have pest notes, and we have some additional webinars announced there as well. This middle resource is safer products and practices for disinfecting and sanitizing surfaces, which Carrie referred to earlier in the webinar. It's from SF Environment. So we've got a direct link there for you. And then also we really highly recommend, if you have any pesticide question at all, you can contact National Pesticide Information Center, NPIC. It's located at Oregon State, but they have people who answer the phone. They have tons of resources on their website, and we utilize them a lot in both of our programs. Some additional resources: Carrie's group has a couple of different newsletters available for you guys. So if you're a landscape and structural professional, the Green Bulletin is the best newsletter that we have for you. And there's a link to subscribe, but also we'll send that link out with your email. And they have a recent article on disinfecting services. And another newsletter that they offer is for retailers and the general public, the Retail Nursery and Garden Center IPM News. And so there's a different article on disinfectants in that newsletter. And it's like chock full of information, not just on disinfectants. It's got great information. And again, we'll send those links out to you.
That link was wrong on there, so sorry about that, everybody. We'll send you the link.
The correct link.
Yeah.
So in a second, I'll tell you how to take the quiz to get your continuing education hours, but I want to make sure that you know that we'll stay on the webinar to answer any questions while other people are taking their quiz, but you can contact me. Any question that I can't answer, I'll forward to Carrie. But my email address is here. We have a joint pesticide safety email address. So if I'm not around or if somebody gets to it quicker, they can answer your question. But also, follow us on Twitter and stuff.